And it says we're live. So we're going to go ahead and start. I'm Joe.
I'm Ashley.
And we are Geek to My Nerd. And we are beginning our BFF book club with our very first book, one of my choosing, called Death's Heretic.
Nice.
When
did you first read this book?
Sometime last year. And I did audiobook for it. I didn't sit and read it. I listened to it and went through it as I was doing classes and that kind of stuff, traveling between school and work and home and that kind of stuff. And it was a good book. I enjoyed it. It's the first book in a couple of them, but it's not the first one I listened to. I listened to the sequel, which we'll get to eventually, somewhere down the line, of the Redemption Engine. But I enjoyed it, but I'm also a massive tabletop role-playing game fan. So, but yeah, that was me. This was your first time hearing it.
Yes. Again, it's, when we're doing these together, we listen, but we, obviously have access to the text as well. But mainly it was the listening experience versus a reading the book in front of you experience.
Yep.
So why don't we go ahead and get into it?
Yeah. Welcome, Cal. Thank you for joining us. So, Death's Heretic by James L. Sutter. This is our basic layout as with the line. Normally, Ashley, as this was my book, make the PowerPoint and work together. So if it's a little not as awesome as most of our episodes, because I made most of it and I'm leading the charge on most of this. So Death's Heretic, we have our overview, our characters, some thematic influences. Gripes about our next book as well. Released November of 2011. Audiobook was released on January 19th, 2016. The author is James Gitt, the person who reads the audiobook, and I honestly forgot to get his name, but we could probably do that in a few minutes. It's the 6th release in the Pathfinder Tales lines of books. Novels set in the world of Galarian, however it's pronounced. The world the Pathfinder role-playing game is set in. Goodreads rating of 3.79 and Amazon rating of 4.5, which is for a fantasy paperback, that is higher than I expected for both of those. Not that it's bad, just in general, fantasy paperback usually don't get a lot of respect among general readers. Page count of 385, and the audiobook length is 10 hours, 9 minutes. So it is only 20 pages shorter than Jurassic Park.
But is 5 hours shorter. And then this is definitely in the line of supplemental fiction, where Pathfinder is the role-playing game. It's the main experience that fans have. But any type of role-playing game, or if you think about Star Wars, there's always the supplemental books. So this is the supplemental genre. TV shows have this as well, where
Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. would be a supplemental genre initially because it went along with the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
They had books.
Okay, I see what you're saying.
So Monk, the TV series, there's Monk books, there's Burn Notice books, I think there's Psych books, there's a lot of D&D novels. So this is a tie-in novel. This
is a time-tested tradition.
Of tie-in literature, which is not is not always the best for a casual reader. If you don't know the source material, then when you go into it, it can be kind of daunting. You might not get all of the references. So, and I haven't played a lot of Pathfinder.
Don't necessarily. And as a GM, I have even more experience with the setting, having to build adventures in this world.
So it's just a casual Pathfinder player.
It was kind of daunting.
Yes, because I've never read all of the books. I've never played in any extensive long-term Pathfinder campaigns to know the world. Whereas I've played a lot of Dungeons and Dragons 3 and 3.5, and I've read a couple of supplemental Dungeons and Dragons novels, and those were a lot easier for me to get into. As a kind of these types of characters, where this was totally new.
Well, I think when you read Homeland, which was the first of the Drizzt or the origin story of Drizzt, I think we were in the Underdark dealing with a ton of drow at that time, so some of the concepts and ideas became way more familiar. But yes, this I enjoyed this a lot. I think I enjoyed Redemption Engine a little more, but I'm kind of a sucker for the setting of that book. Which we'll go into that when we do that one. I'm way excited for Redemption Engine.
right, shall we go?
Let's go. So the overview is our main character, which we'll get into a little more about him in a little bit. Salim Ghaddafar is a kind of like a private investigator for the goddess of death, Pharasma, which is her holy symbol is that little spiral underneath the dude there. He is originally from the nation of Rahadum, which is a nation that basically outlaws religion. And he learned his skills and got his beginning as a pure legion enforcer, which is like a priest hunter. And now he is, years later, acting as kind of like a troubleshooter for the goddess of death. And it's set in the nation of Thuvia primarily, along with other dimensions, which you can't really tell, but that cathedral-looking thing is supposed to be part of the city of Axis, which is a planar city.
So it's like in another dimension?
Yeah. And in another realm entirely tied to law. And the Sun Orchid Elixir is a powerful magical item in Pathfinder that the plot kind of loosely centers around. But we'll get into that a little bit. So it's basically like a nice little noir adventure set in like a pseudo like Middle Eastern Arabian influenced region and that kind of stuff. So we're ready to get to the characters. All right, so as I mentioned him already, Salim Ghaddafar, former Pure Legion enforcer. Now he's a troubleshooter. There used to be priest hunters. He is got a lot of strong, like Sherlock Holmesy or what you would consider like a hard-boiled detective skill set.
Yeah, because again, you did mention this as being kind of a noir with the backdrop of the like Arab or Middle Eastern environment. So yeah, I definitely got those kind of Sam Spade vibes from him, where he's like so over his job.
Yeah. It's like all he wants to do at the end of the day is go like drown his sorrows in a bottle of whiskey. And he's got this tragic backstory. And he's actually a softie, a really kind guy, but his life has hardened him into this like this Joe Diamond style enforcer, to throw a little Cthulhu joke in there. And he works for Pharasma, which is the goddess of birth, death, and prophecy. That's a collection of things.
Yeah, you know, the whole cycle.
And as he grew up in Rahadum and is a firm believer in the kind of things that his nation believes in, he is what Galarian has as atheists, which they hate the gods. They don't really. This is a world where the gods directly intervene. They will show up like physically. So it's kind of hard to say I don't believe in you. I think he even says like only fools and idiots like don't believe.
Yeah, like they explain it really well in the book, like how instead of like not believing in the gods, it's like, well, we just don't worship you. Like we're just more into
it's kind
like
of a
personal like perseverance, and like the gods don't save you because when you really need them, they're not going to answer the call. So.
And they only answer the call because you worship them. It's not like they answer the call because they actually care, or any of that stuff. Because to them, it's the belief that like it's literally like a business exchange, and in the Rahadumi believe in like personal freedoms over that. So they are a nation of like man, like people, humanity, and whatever other races live there. Elves, dwarves, etc. But to live there is to basically abscond or be away from all worshiping of the deities. And his backstory is very tragic, but you know, that's our main character, and he will be he is also in Redemption Engine as our main character. Yep. Next is we have Cyanin, who is a psychopomp. Usher is the specific type he is. Psychopomps are like divine servitors to the goddess of death. They come in all sorts of different fashions and styles. They look anywhere from like little crows with masks to this black winged angel type thing here. And Cyanin is a unique version of a psychopomp. Ushers are like high ranking, powerful ones. And it's hard to determine because
indeterminate gender.
It is and Cyanin is displayed in this way and explained in this way, and I actually really appreciate that about it. But Cyanin's presence is enough every time. Like they use Salim getting nosebleeds to give you a clue, like, oh, Cyanin's here. And Cyanin acts as Salim's handler, gives him his missions, often speaks in riddles, and it's that annoying like it's like think Zordon but insufferable. It's that kind of mentality.
So you mean Alpha 5?
Yeah, but not like annoying, insufferable, but like knows they're better than you and talks down to you all the time. And like, hey, if you only just actually listened and believed, you'd be fine. And you're like, I don't want to stop doing that. So, and Cyanin is an interesting individual simply because they only show up in the book about 3 times. And each time they kind of speak in riddles and they don't really let on what their intent is other than, oh, I work for Pharasma and I'm here to offer you a deal, or I'm here to give you a job, or good job on your job, or whatever. So an interesting character. Shows up again in the next book as well. Next character is Neela Anvinori, who is the daughter of our noble, I think, Faldus Anvinori, a Taldan noble who moved to Thuvia with her father years ago, which Thuvia is very far away. The difference would be something along the lines of like if you lived in France and you moved to somewhere in North Africa. That is about the distance. Though I think Taldor's more like Spain. Regardless, geography doesn't matter. So she is now the heir to the estate because her father is quote unquote kidnapped. In reality, he has been murdered, but his soul was captured. It was prevented from going to the River of Souls. And she is working with Salim to try and get her father's soul back.
Yeah, because he had a pact where if he were to die untimely, that he could be resurrected, and that serum, the Sun Elixir,
was kind of the impetus of this. He went to Thuvia to get the Sun Elixir because he's like a lot of prominent, powerful individuals. They're like, the only thing I can't stop with my money is death. Well, in the world of Pathfinder, there is a way to stop death with your money. So he went there and he won the bid for the Sun Orchid Elixir and died like a day or so later. Was murdered a day or so later. And had a deal set up with the Church of Pharasma to get resurrected if he had an untimely death. Because resurrection, of course, doesn't work if you die of old age.
Yeah.
But she is at the very beginning, and I want to note this is not actually official art of her. This is just the closest representation I could find of her character, because there is unfortunately no art of her character. But she is she's an interesting character, and she actually turns out to be a kind of a more likable character than most of the others in the book, because she's originally presented as a noble who is still no nonsense, but still very noble, like green around the gills, but she doesn't wear like high heels to meetings. She wears like flat, sensible shoes.
Yeah, she's not like Claire from Jurassic World, like running from the T-Rex or that kind of, or the typical like damsel situations that you see in these noir stories.
Yeah, she still is very, and they show it in the book, she's still very inexperienced, very, like I said, green, but she has the potential and the talent and the capability to do it, and some of the training as well. So, but let's move on to our last character. And there's other characters, of course. These are
like ones. The most important characters.
Yeah, the High Priest Khoyar of he is the High Priest of Death in the Lamasaran Temple of Pharasma. The temples typically have 3 High Priests, one of Death, Birth, and Prophecy. He likes to show off. He believes himself higher than even where he is, kind of. He wants to be like this like prolific figure in the entire religious order of Pharasma, and it shows in his personality. He dresses opulently, wears gaudy jewelry. Again, another character that does not have official artwork, so I just kind of picked the most appropriate one. And that is our primary characters. So, one second. Were there any other characters of note that you enjoyed?
I really liked the I can't remember, like I'm really bad with like what the names of the things were.
Was it the one that worked with him for a little bit?
Yeah, like they met him and
the inevitable Calabast.
Yes.
The big construct dude made of obsidian with like an iron helm and whose job is to hunt down mortals.
Yeah, who are like trying to
basically live forever.
Yeah.
He is a Marut inevitable, which I have a picture of him later on, but yeah, he is an interesting character because he is also incredibly no nonsense. he is an entity made up entirely of law. So he's just kind of like, when someone tries to make a joke, he's like, that's what's wrong with this joke. It's not funny.
And then the fact that they had to get his help to do what he's not supposed to let people do. So just the tension of like, oh no, like if he finds out what their real mission is, what's going to happen? That's when I started to get really interested in the story.
So the whole backstory with that part too, because and this is mostly for the viewers at this point, is they go to Axis, which is the city in the plane of law. I forget what the plane's called, but the city of Axis is like this interdimensional city where like law orders everything. Like everything is hard angles and calculated perfectly. So they meet with Calabast, who is again, I said, a Marut who hunts immortals. And when they're explaining like, hey, we need to find this guy's soul. He was killed. It was taken from the River of Souls. That's something your bosses would also be interested in not ever happening again. So we need to find it, et cetera, et cetera. And they even say in the book, like, that Salim goes out of his way to not mention the Sun Orchid Elixir having any part of this. Because I would imagine to entities that are like, yeah, immortality is bad, the Sun Orchid Elixir is like anathema to everything they believe in, because it extends life beyond any sort of natural means. So, but yeah, Calabas is an interesting character. He's not there for a lot, like 2 chapters.
Yeah.
But he's a fun little character to have around. I also really enjoyed Calabas. Like, in the second read through, I found myself I guess, this time around, I found myself enjoying Neela as a character so much more, because you actually get to, like, there's only one time in the book where it's like literally like him saving her like a damsel in distress, because they kind of fall into hell, like literally hell. Like, they fall into this, like, the abyss, and I have to deal with demons, and she's like, what is this? Because all their other introductions to planar entities have been rather benign, or at least neutral. They even dealt with an assassin at one point, but that was a much more familiar terrain than falling into a blasted hellscape where there's demons trying to kill you. So I can imagine if that's your first time having to deal with that, it would be rather unnerving. So, but I believe next we have gripes. Oh no, we have our thematic influences. So Death's Heretic is a very interesting novel, because it is a fantasy genre set in a Middle Eastern setting, primarily a Middle Eastern or Arabian setting, and it shows. They go out of the way to describe the chaotic bazaars and the smells of the meats and the spices and the colors and everything involved. Clothing is described a whole bunch in this book, like all the light clothing people wear, because to wear anything too restricting or tight.
All of the naming conventions felt very much like they came from Arab or other Middle Eastern cultures, like from Iran or such, which would be more Persian.
The plot is, however, very pulp mystery. It begins with Salim getting his mission, his job or whatever, which also feels like a spy thriller in some regards too, because, you know, Sam Spade didn't get jobs from the government, like some quote-unquote dame with legs up to here walked into his office kind of thing. But no, he gets his job, he goes to Thuvia, meets a client, and then he proceeds to, like, eliminate suspects from the list of suspects. And when that's done, he has to reach out to contacts of some other skill set or influence that he doesn't have access to, and then et cetera, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, and they do set it up to where you're suspicious of a lot of different characters at different points. It's like, oh, like, why would that thing why would she have said that? Or like, what is he trying to hide?
And they're like, oh, this person's been cleared because of this reason. Yeah, but have they though?
Yeah, have they?
So it's a pretty interesting mix of things. So yeah, I enjoyed it. There's also, of course, without going into too extensive detail, this thing is chocked full of like Pathfinder influences, because it is set in the Pathfinder world. The gods are talked about all the time. Not only do they talk about them as their name, but they talk about them in nicknames. Like Salim follows, doesn't worship, of course, follows Pharasma. And he refers to her as the Gray Lady, and he has an even more derogatory term for her. I will not repeat here.
Yeah, because it's a bad name.
Yeah, it's pretty bad.
And because this is a tie-in novel, they in a typical fantasy, they would give you the exposition to understand what these things mean.
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, they have expected you to play the role-playing game and read the supplemental materials.
And they give some exposition into some of it, but it's very light.
Yes.
It's very simple and it's very to the point, and that's fine, honestly. And I don't know, because I haven't been able to actually ask the author some of these questions, but he's been very kind in his response to us doing this. But in general, he wrote for the role-playing game before writing this novel. So it could be unintentional too. Like it could be like he's so familiar. Why would he need to go into massive detail to explain everything?
Well, and they're expecting their target audience for these books are people that have played the game.
Yeah, totally. This there's so much from the planar cosmology concepts to like the different rulerships and the different nations, the different religions. Talk about Abadar a whole bunch, and Sarenrae, who are other deities that have temples in Lamasara, which is the city the bulk of this is set in. You deal with Fae, which are, you know, anywhere from like dryads and nymphs to satyrs and pixies and all sorts of creatures of the wilds and all sorts of things. There is a lot going on in this book. I mean, and speaking of like satyrs and nymphs, like that is in the Pathfinder role-playing game, but of course these influences have information tracing all the way back to like Greek mythology and everything. So there's a lot going on in this world that has real world influences as well as the role-playing game influences and other literary influences. So
lots and lots of influences.
Yes, so many. All right, what's next?
All right, gripes.
Our gripes, which we did have some. We try to find something that we have an issue with everything we do, because it's really hard to find anything that's absolutely perfect.
Of course.
All right, first. So I believe this is your gripe about the density, which we've touched on already at the very beginning, about how hard it was to get into it because the world is so immersive and massive.
Because again, it's with tie-in novels, there's that level of expectation from the audience that the audience is familiar with materials.
Yep.
And so because I was unfamiliar with the materials, it took me a long time to get into the book. Versus you, who like had the buy-in as a fan and extensive player and dungeon master of the Pathfinder role-playing game. It was very easy for you to get in and enjoy the book, and plus, since you had accidentally read the previous book, you had already had that character buy-in as well. For me, I was like, "What's happening? What's happening? What's happening?" And then when they met that guy.
Calabas.
Calabas. Like that's when I was like, oh, this is gonna get a lot interesting. And then there's a lot of other moments that kept me engaged with the story because, like, you know, the stakes had risen, they had getting captured or whatever.
Yep.
And I did like the characters, but it was definitely not like a.
It took you like 9 chapters to really get into it.
Yeah, and that's a lot of. Chapters to really give a book, whereas a lot of people, if it's like the first chapter doesn't get them, they'll drop it and pick up a new book. But, you know, since we're doing the show together, I'm not going to be like, we can't do the book. Like, that's not cool. You know, we're not always going to be interested in the same things, and that's fine. But definitely giving, you know, things a chance is important. And, you know, expanding your horizons in books is important. So.
All right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. And that happens in a lot of stuff too. Like there's going to be books that I don't necessarily get into as
and now this will be like a new book that if I know students are into Pathfinder, it's like, oh, have you read this?
Yep. It could be a way to get your gaming. Yeah, we would be careful. And we'll talk about the reasoning for that in a minute. But the Pathfinder Tales are great for gamers to get into reading if they previously weren't into reading.
Yeah, because there's a lot of reluctant readers out there, and this might be the catalyst that helps them.
So this was also kind of a both of us gripe.
Yeah.
And it's something I noticed. I think it's worse in this one. I say worse. It's more prominent in Death's Heretic than Redemption Engine. But it's the male gaze effect.
Yeah, the descriptions of Neela, because everything is from Salim's perspective. Like, it's not one of those typical, like, YA fantasy
where everything
novels.
Is kind of a third-person perspective.
They switch perspectives. Yeah. So it's all from his point of view, and every description of her is about the way her hair looks and, like, the way the clothes are fitting.
Yeah. And
it got annoying after a while, but I will say it wasn't as creepy as some other books I have read.
No, and I am... It's one of those things where I recognize it, and I kind of like... I don't hand wave it, but I kind of accept it. mostly because of the fact that this is kind of in the vein of like pulp storytelling and noir storytelling. And that's, I mean, what does it say? Like, that's when the dame walked in with legs for days.
Yeah,
and
who
things like
couldn't
that.
quit and blood red lips or whatever.
So I feel like that's kind of like, I would love to find out if that was the intent of the language used. Also, you find out towards the end of the novel, probably about chapter 15 or 16, that Salim is like 127 years old, and he hasn't touched or been with a woman since then. And I would imagine he's kind of I don't know, a weird.
It's been a while.
It's been a very long time, a very, very long time. But he's not hateful, and he's not like overtly sexist. He's just very dismissive of a lot of things.
Yeah,
and it's mostly because of he's
seen a lot.
His personal belief in his superiority because of his skill set and his experiences and things like that. But it is a gripe. It is something he knows.
It did stand out. Like, she couldn't pull her hair back, or this hat is like, okay.
At least they tried to find inventive ways each time.
Yeah, but it was kind of gross.
Yeah. It wasn't, like you said,
it wasn't the worst thing I have ever read that was male gazy.
Yeah. But
there was definitely the male gaze going on.
But that's why I chose like a old noir style picture of it.
Yeah.
It works.
Is that from
I think Rear Window?
Nice. That's a good one, yeah.
All right. And I believe next we have likes. Because we only had a couple of gripes. It wasn't huge. And those are like the biggest ones, really. Everything else about it is pretty great.
Because even though like I had a hard time getting into the book, that doesn't mean that the book is bad.
No.
Like that just means that the book was not necessarily one
that would be your normal wheelhouse.
That's in my wheelhouse, in my particular genre. Like I like fantasy books, but usually it's something that's like a new IP or like a YA kind of fantasy. Sometimes it really just depends, because sometimes I have a lot more gripes with those as well.
Yep.
But if we read some in that genre, we'll get into those things. But yeah, just because something is not to my liking, it doesn't mean it's badly written. I thought it was pretty well written.
And for that, I don't think we put it in the likes, but it will be. For the flip of that is the adaptation or modification of existing cultures that happens in fantasy, I think is incredibly well respected in this. Like I don't think like it's a collection of like stereotypes and tropes put into the fantasy culture. I think it's actual understanding of these cultures to an extent and modified for how
looking at them as actual human cultures, and not like, look at them, they're weird, they're doing a thing that we don't do in our culture. Exactly. This did not feel that way. This felt very respectful.
So, and even when Salim dismisses other cultures like Taldan culture, which is like it's more of a European culture, he dismisses it in a way that's not like, oh, they're just backwards and dumb. He's just like, that's just not a culture I like. I don't understand the heavy clothing and the obsession with cream in your food and all these other things.
Yeah.
I prefer my warm sands, and I prefer dates, and I prefer like, a goat kebab and things like that, because that's just what he likes. He's like, but it's fun. It's fine. Cal says we need to put those gripes in the rear window. Nice. Well, it's good because we're to the likes.
All right.
So this is the characters that we liked. There's, of course, making a return is Neela. Because she was awesome. She was just great.
Yeah, even though like she was green in her like she didn't know like you should wipe your sword off after you stab someone.
Because she's never stabbed someone.
She's never stabbed anyone before. But yeah, I thought she was very well represented. She wasn't really like a damsel in distress. Yeah, I thought she had a lot of agency for herself and was very smart. And then the way that the guy did the voice for her, she sounded kind of like B. Arthur. So I really liked that in the audiobook.
Yes, Roy Porter, I believe was his name. I double checked. I looked it up. He does the voice for both of these books. Yes, Roy Porter. And he does unique voices and accents for every character. And it's really nice.
Yeah, because sometimes in audiobooks, they'll get like a whole cast of people to play all the characters. Really cool. But sometimes it's just on the voice actor to differentiate between the narrative voice versus the characters. And I liked all the character voices.
Yep. And then we have Calabast is the other one there, who is everyone's favorite Marut, who hunts down, the immortals. They're pretty great. Big obsidian constructs with iron and gold helms and bracers that use electricity for everything. And he also had a pretty great voice representation in it.
It's probably one of my favorites.
So, what's next? All right, so I like all the Pathfindery stuff. It's really nice to see the representation and represented relatively accurately. On the left over here, we have the map of the Inner Sea region, with the Thuvia being like the top of the lower continent. You see the little desert area. You can see the little desert area. Thuvia is like the central country in that desert area. But that, and then we have the city of Axis. They go to the first world, which is a land of like Fae and creation. And that's pretty awesome. And then over on the far right, we have the exact kind of protean entities of chaos that they deal with, and they're crazy. They live in the twisting nether of the reality between realities, where everything is just molding into chaos everywhere and transforming and shifting constantly. And it's just all well represented in such a way. But there is one thing about this book that I like above the others, and I think you even liked this if you go to the next one, was the magic. And that's what the two left slides are supposed to represent. Every time Salim uses magic or someone else uses magic, the way it's represented on how it feels using magic, the way the magic is represented visually in the texts, healing magic, talking about how it knits the bones together, and how like there was a scar on someone's face when he was healing them, and it weeped out the dirt and everything that had accumulated in there from falling on the ground.
Yeah, that was really cool. Or like the way he describes how he feels when he has to call upon the gods because he's an atheist.
Yeah,
and how it like literally like destroys a little part of him.
Yeah. He describes it as like inky blackness warping through him and corrupting him. As we're like someone who was like super into the god they worship.
They would feel empowered.
They would feel like they would feel the presence, like a warm presence going through him. But for him, it feels like intrusive and corrupting and everything. And it's a really cool way they describe it. But even then, like he does that, and there's one point where he's chasing down a satyr through a field, and he talks about that. And then he talks about how his legs feel like they like burst into flames and he can run even faster, and that's what he does. And that's the spell Expeditious Retreat, which I was just like, that's awesome.
And then when they describe the feelings of going to the different planes and how it's like it's not like a casual thing to like go planes hopping. Like it makes you feel like physically ill.
Yeah, like the world warps around you, and it's like being pulled into a vacuum cleaner and then landing on solid ground somewhere else. That kind of stuff. And they talk about when they're in the presence of the protean, they talk about how their bodies are warping because of the chaos, and how Salim's muscles are just like tripling and expanding under his skin to the point to where he can't even move, and things like that. It's just very cool, descriptive ways they go into describing these supernatural elements of this role-playing game that when you're playing the game, you don't think about, because at some point you've cast Cure Light Wounds 87 times in your lifespan. You're not thinking
about how Cure Light Wounds is making you feel when it's applied to you.
Yeah, or like, how a cure spell is going to work, or what it looks like to see a steel sword literally bounce off the skin of a demon or something like that. It's little things like that.
Yeah, I did like the magic descriptions. It would be really boring if it's like he cast Cure Light Wounds.
Yeah.
Like, okay, like I could have written that, but like he really goes into like some great descriptions to really help you visualize what's happening. Great imagery.
There's even one part where he talks about towards the end of the book when they're infiltrating the temple, he uses invisibility magic. He uses it on Neela first, and he tells her to like hold on to my belt, otherwise you will not be able to find me once I use it on myself as well. If we can separate it, do this. We'll figure it out. But he talks about when he casts it on himself, of course it goes into the description of like the disturbing presence, but then his eyes have to adjust because his eyelids and corneas have now become translucent because he's invisible. So every fiber of his being is invisible.
You don't think about those kind of like scientific aspects of casting spells.
Yeah, it's just a fantastic little touch that I think is something that most fantasy lacks. And because I think of like the old Magic the Gathering books I read, and they just talk about like so-and-so threw a fireball. I'm like, yeah, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah.
I don't need the mathematic equation of what it takes to learn to use magic, but like there is more to it. You are channeling the forces of creation through your being.
Yeah, I don't remember in the Faerun book them talking about like what magic missile feels like to cast or anything.
Well, but I don't think Drizzt was really much of a spellcaster. He was always like swords and junk.
But still, like this definitely took a care to create that imagery.
Yes, it was fantastic.
I don't know if this is typical of the other books in the Pathfinder series, but this author definitely captures something that is pretty cool. That takes something that's very, on the surface, magic is amazing, but if it's like he casts a spell, like that's so basic. Even in like Harry Potter, like maybe like the effects of the spells are like described very vividly, but like the casting, because they're using a wand, it's not as I don't think it's quite as descriptive. Now it's been several years since I've read any of the Harry Potter books, so obviously if I'm wrong, then I'm wrong and we'll fix that later, but I don't remember it being,
it doesn't feel like it's a huge thing,
how like it could like hurt you as like the spellcaster, but again, the magic works differently in that universe.
Well, and then it's also the mentality that like it's even like the first thing that like I would imagine there would be a cool paragraph or something, or just a cool sentence talking about the first time Harry cast the spell, like how that must have felt to him as a person
to actually cast him successfully.
Yeah, even something as simple as like Wingardium Leviosa. It's not Leviosa. And then the last thing is La Masara is a kind of a cool city. This is a little map from the book of the city of La Masara with some of the important things of the city, like mentioned. Two of the individuals, the quote-unquote the harlot and the jackal, their locations are put on there, as well as the marketplace and the temple of Pharasma. They're all like represented on this map as the darker locations. Cool stuff. So I think, one moment, I think that's all of our stuff for this book. All in all, I enjoyed it. I still think I will enjoy revisiting Redemption Engine more than Death's Heretic. I like Death's Heretic, but
yeah, I thought it was a very serviceable fantasy novel. It was definitely like my interest would kind of wax and wane depending on the action, but I thought it was a well-written book. I liked the characters, so I'm interested because since you said that the Redemption Engine was a lot better, that I'm hoping that I'll be a lot more into that one now that I've kind of immersed myself in the world of this book. So again, I'm glad that I have a new book that I can maybe recommend to kids. There's some things in there I'm like,
There is, and it's something I'm not necessarily going to say is a gripe, but it's a simple understanding that it does have some adult things that happen. It's not
very tasteful.
It is. It's handled tastefully, but the subject matter is still there.
Yeah, I mean, I've read things that were in YA
books. We read things that were worse in junior high.
Yeah,
with the Xanth novels from Pierce Anthony.
True.
Those things are just miserable if you think about it. You start breaking down what those books are about, and you're like, "Wow, this is
messed up.
This is bad."
But when you're a kid, you don't realize.
You don't think about. Well, it was the late '90s.
Yeah, different time.
We weren't nearly as aware of the world as we are now.
We weren't as woke.
I was going to say that, but we weren't too aware.
Yeah.
But all in all, I still really enjoy it.
Yeah, I would like to see if this author has anything outside of the Pathfinder books. I'd be willing to like give his stuff a shot.
And I believe he left Piazzo to, I think, write full time.
Oh, cool.
So we'll probably be getting a lot more. I think he does other fantasy novels too.
I'll just see what he has out there. Maybe we could pick that for a future selection.
I think that would be a good idea.
Speaking of future selections.
Yes, we're at the part where we talk about what book is our next BFF book club.
All right, so I picked this one. August is back to school month for a lot of us in America, and I was trying to think of like what is a book that has school as kind of a setting, and that wasn't like a fantasy book or anything, as I wanted to read something that I hadn't read yet. So I thought about Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda, which was turned into the major motion picture Love, Simon, which we saw and I absolutely loved. It's one of my top favorite movies of the year.
It's a fantastic movie.
So I thought, like, what's the source material going to be like? I thought it might have some cool text features because of the way the narrative works in the movie, and I wanted to see what the differences are. So I figured this would be like the perfect thing for back to school, something that is, mildly popular among a lot of people. I know a
mhm.
lot of my students have read this book, and I like to see what they're reading too, and hopefully it's an enjoyable experience.
Hopefully. So yeah, we'll announce the official date, but it's going to be towards the end of August that we do the book.
Yeah,
do we do the episode?
Probably the last Sunday in August, which is a 20-something.
Which is something that can be relatively expected of this show.
Hello, Tiblet.
The last Sunday of the given month that we're doing the book in is what we'll probably do, with exceptions. When we get to December and such, it might be a little more challenging. Tiblet is just all up in our business right now.
She's like, I love everybody.
But the next book will be Simon versus the Homo Sapien Agenda, which, if you need it in audiobook, you can check the description below, especially if you're watching this video after the fact, where we have put a link to our own Audible offer thing that you can do. It's Audible offer, whatever it is. It's below. But it's /Geek to My Nerd.
Yeah, so if you get an Audible from that link, then that actually helps out our channel.
It helps out our channel. You'll get a free book. Everybody wins.
Everybody wins.
But yes, if you go subscribe using that link, if you are not a previous subscriber to audible.com, you'll get a free audiobook. Your first free audiobook is free. It's like $12 or $15 a month, and you get basically a free book every month.
Yeah, so we utilize it quite frequently.
I think we've had an Audible for almost like a year and a half, 2 years now.
And then the credits don't expire, so maybe if you don't buy something that month, then they'll stack up. I think
you can store up to 6 credits.
Nice.
So, in general.
So that's been really helpful, especially, we get really busy or whatever, and if you don't have time to sit down and read a book like for class or for whatever.
If you're on the road a lot.
Yeah, that's helped me a lot when I reread To Kill a Mockingbird every year. I reread it with the audio one for what I don't read in class.
For my class, I was in a fantasy literature class this past semester, and I listened to the audiobook as an addition to reading. Like, it helped me because I have attention deficit disorder. And it is very difficult to sit and focus for a long time. Way too long is not the right wording, but for a long period of time. So having the audiobook and the text material really helped me be able to study and focus on what I was doing.
I wish that they had Audible and that audiobooks were more prevalent when I was in college, because there was a lot of challenging literature that I had to read.
Yeah, because $100 CD sets.
Yes, because I was a creative writing major, but we had a lot of literature classes. That was the majority of our degree, and yeah, a lot of the texts were really challenging. And when something is not of your selection to read, it does make it a lot harder to read it sometimes when it's not something that you're enjoying the reading of. So the audiobooks would have been real helpful to have, here's the book in front of you and here's the person helping you read along so that you can stay engaged. I think I found an audiobook one time, but it was abridged, so it would skip stuff randomly, and it was so annoying.
There's some also really decent audiobooks you can find on YouTube, because that's where I found one of my books
that was in the public domain.
Worm Ouroboros.
Yeah,
and a lot of my Lovecraft and
anything that's in the public domain you can get it things but YouTube. But
yes, Audible is fantastic.
But if something's not in the public domain, gotta go with the official sources.
Which this was, I think, the 3rd or 4th book I bought through Audible with my credits and such, and it was enjoyable. I was glad I did it.
Yeah.
But yes, down below you can find our Twitter handle, which is Geek to My Nerd with underscores between each one. The author is something like I have the link right here and I can read it. I should probably read it. www.audibletrial.com/geek-to-my-nerd. The link, like I said, is in the description. So please, if you were ever wanting to check out Audible, please use our link. Get a free book. It's better than just going and signing up, because then you're paying $15 for your first book. But this way you can get a free book, and you're helping us out.
Yes.
And if you like it, stay subscribed. Get more books. Keep going.
It's really great, because sometimes your library doesn't have every audiobook or ebook.
I have heard rumors that the old Shadowrun novels from the 80s and 90s are going to be audiobooks soon, and those books are almost impossible to find physically now. So I'm excited about that.
Nice.
I would love to do a Shadowrun book on here.
Well, we can.
But this has been our BFF Book Club, our inaugural episode.
Yeah, we had kind of a soft episode, a soft intro with the Jurassic Parks.
Yeah.
But this is the first official one.
Yeah.
And something that we hope to continue to do.
Yes, monthly. And we would love to hear what you guys think in the comments below. Whether about the book, whether about the format. You have any suggestions for books, put them up.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking into other ways to do. Oh my God, cats! And we'll be back next month with Simon versus the Homo sapien agenda.
Homo sapiens. There's more than one.
Well, that's true. But you could use like just without the S, and it would still be a.
It would still sound all right.
Group.
Yeah.
So thank you for joining us, everyone. Have a lovely evening. Bye.